New York, autumn of 1931. The streets holding their breath as old vows cracked, and new rules took shape. They called him Luciano. Lucky to some, Luciano to most. He walked Mulberry and Park. He sat in rooms with sharp suits and dull eyes. He smiled with his mouth, not with his eyes. He kept quiet. Wait. Because quiet paid. He watched the old empires bend. He watched young hands set the table. He saw blood buy time and order. Before that month, there was Masseria. Joe the boss, with heavy hands and hungry ears. He kept cards on the table and pistols near bread baskets. He liked his wine dark and his sauce heavier. He kept the old oath like a saint medal. He liked men scared. He liked the word never question. Mamma mia, the old head moved slow, but he moved strong. He wore double-breasted jackets that breathed money. He kept a small cornicello in his pocket. He touched it before business. Across the river, there was Maranzano, Castellamarese. Hard stare, soft voice. He cut his nails at the window and studied coins from old Rome. He liked Latin words in a Brooklyn mouth. He preached structure, corpo e disciplina. He called captains decine and the lieutenants something older. It sounded noble. It sounded tight. He ate anchovies with warm bread, and he said a small prayer before he ate. He wanted order more than sleep. He wanted a kingdom without noise. Between them moved Luciano. Between them moved Costello. Between them moved Vito and Tommy and Scalise. Between them moved the young with clean shoes. They played both sidewalks, figiu. They listened and nodded and kept hands clean in the daylight. They paid dues in the dark. They gambled small, never big. They kept tabs at the barber, at the cigar store, at the club with the hanging mirror. They drank espresso like medicine. They wrapped biscotti in napkins for the ride. Rituals held the center. The door closed, the window shut, the candles lit near a small picture of a saint. A finger pricked with a needle, a drop rubbed on a card. The picture burned slow in the hand. The ashes kissed the palm. An oath crossed the room like a hard wind. Omerta, amuni. It meant silence and duty. It meant respect for the table above. It meant no wife outside the marriage. It meant no law called by name. It meant the tongue was stronger than a revolver when it stayed still. He knew the way they dressed. Fedoras tipped low. Cotton shirts pressed flat with starch from a bathhouse in Red Hook. Silk ties tied thin. Shoes shined on Sunday morning. even if dirty by noon. A scapular around the neck. A cornicello for the malocchio. A pocket roll of crisp bills. 2 photographs in the wallet. Madre and a child. They crossed themselves at street shrines with candles in jelly jars. They gave money to priests for a new roof. They asked the Lord to keep bullets far. The war started slow. A bar closed on a Friday. A driver vanished in the fog. A grocer's morning changed when the lock broke. Then it ran faster. Machine pistols in parked cars. Boys with new gloves in alleys. Old bosses riding home with tired guards. It was business and a grudge, paisa. It was nostalgia with a pistol. Luciano stood on corners and spoke in short phrases. He offered jobs, not talk. He kept his eyes on men's hands. He watched who paid respect and who paid with excuses. He let Masseria think he was loyal. He let Maranzano think the same. He left space for both to breathe. He ate at both tables. He listened to 2 kinds of old songs. He gave each man a gift. Wine here, olive oil there. A small envelope for one. A story for the other. He moved a phone call to the park bench and a meet to a Coney Island restaurant. He never rushed. He never bragged. He never chewed too long on a name. One time he carried a battered suitcase stuffed with cash to Newark. He bought a bar he didn't need. He bought it to make a man look like a king in front of his cousin. He signed nothing. He shook hands, kissed cheeks, and left the keys on the counter. He drank a quick espresso and drove away with the window down. He did it because the cousin had a loud mouth and a big family. He did it because the appearance of power calmed restless boys. He did it because it cost less than bullets. He ate simple when heat came. Fennel salad with oranges. Pane e panelle from a cart on Elizabeth Street. Escarole and broth when the stomach turned. He kept a talisman under the mattress. A tiny horn on a string. He kept a rosary under the ashtray. He wore socks without holes because old men said holes brought trouble. He believed a little. He doubted a little. He never walked under a ladder. He told the youngest to keep a clean handkerchief. He told them to show up early or not at all. Then the day came for Joe the boss. April 1931. Lunch near the sea. A table with cards. A table with wine and pistachios. You know the spot. Fig U. The old restaurant with a waiter who never looked up. The room smelled of garlic and rain. Luciano joked about luck. He excused himself for a call. He let the door swing wide. The other boys entered like customers, late for lunch. Genovese walked with shoulders low. Anastasia with eyes like knives, but the eyes kept quiet. Adonis smiled too much. Siegel kept his jacket open. They stood near the table and let a second pass. They handled business clean. No yelling, no words to the dead. No gloating over old cards. The old boss slid sideways. The waiter looked at the floor. The deck stayed spread on the table. The city blinked. The tide rolled and rolled. The road outside kept its cars moving. That was betrayal to some. That was survival to others. The old oath rubbed against new facts. The streets called it the end of the first act. The morgue called it another toe tag. Luciano played it calm. He sent flowers to an aunt. He paid a week's rent for a nephew. He told boys to shut their mouths while the newspapers ran wild. With Masseria gone, Maranzano moved fast. He removed coats from hooks that were not his. He split families like a knife through bread. He crowned himself capo di tutti capi in a room where saints watched from the wall. He set ranks and boundaries. He made lists that never left his vest. He spoke of Julius and Augustus and 10 orders of men. He called in captains and told them to memorize codes. He lectured on warfare with a book on the table. He quoted from church and the army in one breath. Not everyone loved the lesson. Some nodded and made their eyes soft. Some stared at the cuffs. Some thought of school days and nuns with rulers. Tommy Lucchese told a story about shoes in a factory and how a foreman who spoke too much ended with no friends at lunch. The room laughed, then went quiet. Maranzano smiled without humor. He told Tommy to be a soldier, not a clown. He told him the Roman army would have spanked him for smiling. In his office on Park Avenue, Maranzano kept guards with short haircuts. They frisked visitors from the feet up. They took knives like priests take confession. They checked hats and passed cigarettes back only after inspection. He kept a crucifix on the wall and a big map with colored pins. He used pins for men. He tapped the map with his finger like a drum. He made boys wait outside on folding chairs. He made even old friends take off their shoes. He liked them humbled. Luciano looked away. He tasted the air. He felt the old world tightening around the new. He saw jealousy and fear twist into policy. He predicted arrests and betrayals and endless hunger. Maya Lansky spoke to him in a corner booth. He spoke in a soft voice that carried far. He said the crown brought heat. He said a board would bring cool air. He said many heads could carry one burden. They brought in the next play. They used boxes without labels and voices without ego. They used friends outside the oath. They used men who could walk through a front door without sparks. They used Jewish boys who wore hats without brims and smiled like clerks. They dressed them as taxmen. with badges borrowed and suits pressed tight. They sent him to Park Avenue with folders and pens and a different kind of warrant. He was on the phone when they came. He hung up slow. He told his guard to wait outside because the government wanted to count the books. He fixed his tie and set his eyes on a window. He never made it to the map. Business was quick, and the echo fell flat. No speeches, no ceremony. The old world lost its crown in a room with office chairs. Outside, the city kept moving. On another block, a kid bounced a ball. In a church, a candle went out and another was lit. They called it betrayal again. They called it unholy. They called it necessary in the same breath. Paisa, the streets learned to hold two truths. The ashes cooled, and men shaved and went back to booths. The word capo de tutti capi walked out the door with that body. It never came back. The next day, a quiet meeting took place at a hotel no one remembers right. Some say the Astoria. Some say a suite near Central Park. Some say a back room on Broadway with extra curtains. They came in pairs, with drivers staying in the rain. They wore dark coats and lighter faces. Luciano sat at the center, not at the head. Costello poured coffee and talked about practical life. Lucchese counted heads and watched the street. Vito kept one hand on the chair and one under the table. Over on another side, Joe Bonanno listened more than he spoke. He kept notes in his head, not on paper. Profaci smelled like olive oil and incense. He held a rosary under the table without moving his lips. He smiled like a good uncle, but his eyes stayed cold. From outside towns, there came bigger shadows. A man from Chicago with a hat like a billboard. Maybe Capone or a trusted friend. He called Luciano Kid, then called him boss, then called him partner. A man from Buffalo, Stefano Magaddino, sat like a stone with a good tailor. He was quiet, but his eyes counted every cigarette. A cousin from Cleveland, maybe, stepped through the door with a gift of cigars. They all knew the math. They all knew the blood cost too much. Luciano spoke plain. No crown. No more boss of bosses. A table instead. A commission. Votes for disputes. Respect for lines on a map. Tributes handled by agreed cuts. No one acts against another boss without the table nodding. No kidnappings. Because kidnappings bring wars. No bombs in churches or schools. No drugs for the street kids. Keep that far from home. Keep policemen out of the obituary pages. He kept it calm and short. He said the table would meet when needed. He said the table would be bigger than one man. They sipped coffee and nodded. Frank Costello raised a point about judges who needed envelopes. He said no more double paying to two mouths. He said one cash box under one name. He made a list on the back of a menu. Lucchese spoke about trucks and piers and how fights on the dock cost money and time. He said a strike could sink 10 numbers banks in a week. Better to pay one union head and keep deliveries safe. Joe Bonanno told a small story. One time a young soldier wanted to show off. He bought a new Buick with cash and parked it outside a club. He revved the engine and laughed. 2 nights later, the Buick was gone. But the kid still had to pay the papers on it. He learned the rule. Nothing flashy. Modesty kept eyes tired, not awake. The table smiled and agreed. They set a rule: to bury the wealth under quiet. Profaci brought a platter of mortadella and breadsticks to the next talk a week later. He talked about charity and church festivals. He said a donation at San Gennaro kept neighbors friendly. He said a statue on Mulberry brought better luck than a pistol in June. He offered to run the collection quietly. Magaddino said okay, but keep the books straight. He asked for a cut to fund certain businesses in Niagara. He counted every cent like a priest counts beads. The commission had 5 seats for New York families. Luciano's group, Mangano's group by the docks, Gagliano's outfit in the garment district, Profaci's in Brooklyn and South, Bonanno's men with ties to Sicily. Out of town, there was a seat for Chicago, a seat for Buffalo. Others got a say sometimes, but not a vote. The table would grow and shrink with need. They did not print minutes. They did not take photographs. They kept rules in heads and enforced them with visits. Everyday life improved in strange ways. Fewer wakes, fewer surprises. Men went to barbers with lighter shoulders. They ordered espresso without checking the mirror every minute. They still tipped the hat low, but they laughed a little more. They still kissed their wives at doorways and told their mothers they ate enough. They still carried rosaries in pockets and salt in shoes for luck. They still kept their mouths shut when policemen asked the wrong questions. One small anecdote. A capo carried a suitcase to Philly to buy a tavern. He bought it because the owner's son married his cousin. He paid cash and told the owner to keep running it the same. He did not want a new sign. He didn't even want better tables. He wanted a quiet, safe room for talks and a closet for winter coats. He said no jukebox. He said no loud songs. He left and sent a new bartender 2 days later. This was how quiet power moved. It bought the house and let the neighbors think nothing changed. Another small bit from the life. Vito Genovese insisted a garlic be sliced a certain way at his house. He said big pieces gave strength. He said thin ones vanished in sauce. He barked at a nephew who answered with jokes. The nephew went home with a new respect for garlic and older men. Later, Vito used that same nephew to carry envelopes to a judge. The same nephew learned to say, "Buongiorno," and leave fast. Frank Costello had a way with politicians. He never shouted. He never threatened. He put a coin on the table and told a mayor from a small parish how to split profits without noise. He sent slots to New Orleans with a priest's blessing on the truck. He made everyone feel they worked together for family and city. He was the prime minister, way. The commission leaned on him for talk and for calm. He handled calls when voices rose. Tommy Lucchese wore small suits that hid big plans. He kept the garment district breathing. He knew every truck by name. He knew every seamstress by first name. He set up a system where disputes were solved over coffee, not wrenches. He liked shoes polished and deals quick. He joked, then he watched. He always watched. He told a story of a tailor who stitched a pocket just big enough for an envelope. The room laughed for 5 minutes. Then they stopped laughing and nodded. The commission also set discipline, not just for outsiders, for their own kind. A soldier who raised a hand to another captain without cause paid fines or took a trip to Florida. A man who touched a boss's niece without permission found himself selling fruit in Jersey. A man who talked on the phone after midnight without code earned a seat at a table he didn't like. They kept it quiet, but the lines were clean. They respected families, even inside the family. Religion stayed. It was part of the breath. Morning mass when needed. The candle on the kitchen counter. A priest at the table for Sunday pasta sometimes. Old friend from the village. He blessed the meal and ignored the money on the sideboard. He told them to be good to their wives. He told them to stay away from bad habits. He ate spadini and went home with a bottle of wine. They nodded and tried to be decent at home. They tried to keep business out of the living room. They rarely managed, but they tried. Superstitions were not jokes to them. Salt under the pillow when traveling. A small cross made of palm tucked behind the visor. 3 knocks on wood before a meeting with hard men. They kissed their thumbs and touched the steering wheel. They turned around if a black cat cut the street. They kept the dead close in picture frames. They put coins in pockets for luck. They kept an old pocket knife from a grandfather, never washed. Another anecdote from a night near the piers. Mangano liked to walk after dinner near the water. He wore a coat with a big collar and hands inside. He watched cranes move slowly. He said the sea calmed his bones. He liked the smell of cold iron and rope. He talked to a dock boss who smoked too much. He told him to pay men on time and skip the arguing. He left as quiet as he came. A week later, the same boss tried a small cheat. Anastasia, the man of steel, let him know that cheats sink quick. He did not cheat again. Albert Anastasia himself wore anger like a tie. Short and dark, he was thunder when crossed. He did not attend commission talk unless asked. He preferred action with his trusted crew. He visited barber shops often to calm the mind and watch others relax. He liked hot towels and low music. He thought better under steam. Once in a Times Square shop, he never got to stand up. The story went far. The commission felt the chill and the message. Respect the table, but remember the street decides some days. Years went by after 1931. The commission turned into a habit. New cases came and went. A complaint about a numbers banker who underpaid. A fight over a load of Canadian whiskey. A judge with too much appetite. The table handled it. Votes moved the air. Men left with orders and smiles that hid the grind. Even when Luciano himself fell in 1936, on charges with headlines and whispers, the machine kept turning. Costello kept the seat warm. Lucchese held the corner of the city together. Vito waited and waited, then moved when the door opened. They still spoke of betrayal in corners. Some old-timers never forgave Luciano for Masseria. Some never forgave him for Maranzano. They called him Traditori and whispers. They lit candles for the old bosses on feast days. They told stories of simpler codes. Younger men said he saved 100 lives with one move. They said the commission was a shield. They said the old ways were chains that broke bone. A small story floated through clubs for years. A soldier bragged that he was so loyal, he refused to sit in a restaurant where a rival once ate. He starved to prove a point. An older capo shook his head and sent him a sandwich with extra peppers. He told him loyalty did not mean starving. Loyalty meant doing the job and keeping the peace. The soldier learned. He ate the sandwich and took his seat with less drama. Another memory, quick and sharp. The kid from Bensonhurst carried envelopes to a judge in Queens. The kid wore a suit too big and shoes too loud. He brought trouble with each step. Lucchese stopped him mid-block. He sent him to a barber, to a shoemaker, to a tailor. By night, the kid looked modest and clean. He delivered the envelope without drawing eyes. Lesson delivered. Clothes were armor. Behavior a shield. Noise brought heat, and heat burned money. They loved food because food brought calm. Sunday gravy simmered 6 hours. Meatballs with pine nuts. Braciole tied with cotton string. Sausages cooked slow. Bread from the bakery before noon, never after. Salad after the meal, not before. Oranges with fennel seeds. Coffee with anisette. Just a splash. In those kitchens, they left anger at the door. They wiped hands on towels and kissed kids on the head. They threw salt over shoulders and laughed at dumb jokes. They kept their clubs dark and cool. Folding chairs on tile floors. Photos on walls. Some saints, some presidents. A back room with cards and a green lamp. A small table with a bell. Newspapers folded. never crumpled. Radios low. A box of cigars somebody swore were better than the last box. They sat and watched the street through slats. They drank espresso in white cups with chips. They played Scopa and Briscola and let anger pass through like a draft. When new initiations came after the commission formed, they were cleaner, but not soft. The oath changed a word here and there. Less talk of burning flesh, more talk of duty and the table. The pricked finger still bled. The saint still burned. The room still smelled of wine and smoke and wax. The Godfather still kissed both cheeks. He still reminded them of silence. He still reminded them that betrayal carried no second chance. He said omerta like a prayer. An old superstition said never greet someone with a knife in hand. So they put knives down before shaking hands. An older superstition said not to put a hat on a bed. Many refused hotels that offered no proper stand. They believed, and then they laughed at themselves, and then they believed again. These things kept them human, while they managed hard accounts. One time the commission settled a business about trucks in Jersey. A wise guy had bought a fleet without permission. He used the trucks to move things that belonged to another family. He insisted on his rights. He cited no law, only anger. The table called him in. Luciano spoke and used few words. Costello added 2 more. Nagadino lit a cigarette and stared. The man returned the trucks and offered an envelope for the trouble. The room stayed calm. That was the point of the commission. Calm that stuck. Order that did not humiliate. But it wasn't all neat. Arguments spilled into streets sometimes. A young captain felt slighted. A union boss got greedy. A politician forgot who fed him. Men with guns did what men with guns do. The commission then had to pretend it didn't know, while making sure it wouldn't happen twice. They called for funerals with closed caskets. They sent thick wreaths. They told wives the money would keep coming. They avoided harsh words about specific nights. But memory lived in the margins. The betrayal of Masseria at stake and card table. The betrayal of Maranzano at office with maps on the wall. Some said Luciano stared too long at the future and not enough at the past. Some said the past did not feed kids. In the end, a system stood where a throne fell. That was the ledger. Little aside about charms. A certain boss would not leave home without a small pouch with blessed salt and a saint medal. He had his wife sew it into each jacket. He swore it caught bullets, or at least caught bad luck. He lived long enough to see grandchildren. He said the pouch did it. Others said good planning, and good friends did it. Either way, he lit candles each week at a small church on Henry Street. Another aside about food and business. There was a place in Queens where they make Zeppoli only on Fridays. A little stand by the tracks. The oil was old, but the dough sang. The boss used that spot for meetings. No one looked twice at men with powdered sugar on their suits. They talked money over paper bags with grease spots. They settled 2 big arguments there and 1 family dispute. The lady at the stand never knew, and that was good. That's how they liked it. Business hidden inside life, not life inside business. As years passed, new faces joined the commission. Names shifted, chairs changed. Men went away to prison, and others came home with quiet smiles. They still followed rules, even tighter now. The press got smarter. The law got sharper. They adapted with shoes 1 size smaller. They still called each other paisa. They still kissed cheeks at wakes. They still sent baskets at births. They still kept notebooks in their heads. They look back sometimes, those who lived long enough. They remembered earthen floors in Sicily and steam radiators in tenements. They remembered getting smacked by mothers with wooden spoons. They remembered the first time a captain called them "fig you" and meant it. They remembered a Sunday afternoon with Sinatra on the radio and money on the table under a dish towel. They remembered men who went quick. They remembered men who should have kept their mouths closed. At the end, many agreed on this. Luciano's betrayal cut deep, but it stopped the flood. His hand cleaned the board. His idea put legs on the future. He traded one man's crown for a table. He traded titles for treaty. He made enemies that day, way. He made a road the day after. The commission wasn't holy, but it saved money and time and faces. It saved boys from dying young over slices of sidewalk. It let mothers sleep sometimes. But betrayal leaves a scar, even when it buys peace. Some never shook his hand again. Some kissed him on the cheek and washed their hands twice. He carried all that. He still smiled for photographs. He still dressed neat. He still put down his hat before shaking hands. He still whispered, "I'm your knee," when he stood to go. The silence around all this grew thicker each year. Omerta kept stories only half told. The oath never changed on one point. Betrayal of the family meant the ground opened under your feet. Betrayal of the table meant you became a memory with bad luck. But betrayal of a king who made himself king, that line stayed blurry. In 1931, blurry lines saved lives. Luciano's name sits in that blur. Not saint, not animal. Something in the middle that keeps wheels moving and candles lit. In the clubs, late at night, they told it straight. One man demanded all, another man offered a share. The share won. The city grew into that share, even when it forgot who offered it. The commission kept the map on the wall and the phone ringing. It kept war small and profits big. It kept the faces aging instead of fading at 25. Ask the old men in Bensonhurst about the first years. They will shrug. They will sip espresso and touch the cornicello. They will talk about bread, not blood. They will tell you to respect your mother and keep your mouth shut. They will say the table mattered. They will say capo di tutti capi was a dead phrase. They will move the sugar bowl an inch and change the subject. One more small tale to close the circle. A young associate once asked the captain why the commission never took pictures together, like a board of directors. The captain looked at him the way men look at children who ask why the sky is blue. He told him this wasn't a club with pins. This was a family of families. They breathed, and you don't photograph breath. The kid nodded. For once he understood something without needing to touch it. He never asked again. He lived long, which already made him a genius. So this is how it went. The betrayal of Luciano opened the door. The commission took the room. The city adjusted its belt. The families stopped throwing stones at church windows and started paying for the roof. Some called that progress. Some called it sin. Most called it business. The candle kept burning on the kitchen counter. The rosary stayed by the bed. The hat stayed on the proper hook. In the end, history remembers the moves, not the meals. But meals carried the memory. Plates clinked, cups tapped, deals sealed quiet. That's where the commission truly lived. In back rooms with sugar and spoons. In Saints' Day parades with folded bills and aprons. In the space where men decided not to stab old ghosts again. No songs about it. Just years of men aging into suits and children learning to kiss rings without staring. A last reflection sits heavy. Betrayal can make a king bleed or make a city breathe. It depends on where the knife lands and who holds it steady. Honor bends under hunger. Silence keeps the fence from breaking. Legacy is a ledger no one gets to balance twice.